What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Cilio's Network. Zapdos Jirachi just took first place at the OCIC, the most recent international championships. Standard format, first large tournament with Team Up Legal. That's the new set that came out February 1st or 2nd. Isaiah Williams, Danny Altavia, Michael Pramawat, and other notable players all played this deck. I think it's going to be a very popular deck that's going to get net decked and tweaked just a bit and show up in Collinsville Regionals, which is next weekend. I think it's going to be really popular and definitely a deck to have on your radar to try to beat or play it yourself. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is mostly how to beat it. So I'll be analyzing the list, so there's also things to look at if you want to play this deck yourself. Maybe some things to change because of weaknesses that can be capitalized upon now that we know the list and that we know how popular and strong it will likely be for Collinsville. So here's the list. This is a picture that Michael Pramawat from ARG shared. For Zapdos, for Jirachi, just very consistent. You want to have Jirachi in the active and you want to switch into Zapdos so you can swing 80 plus each turn. I'll talk about all the counts on the next slide with the list analysis. But just a very consistent, straightforward build here. Nothing really special. The Tapu Koko GX is kind of like a tech. It's just a big bursty attacker you have for higher HP Pokemon that you need to get off the board. And then Absol, of course, is a tech for mirrors and other things that are using Jirachi. So analyzing the list, these are all points that I've looked at to try to decide how to best capitalize on weaknesses. So they're using 3 escape board, 3 rope, 3 switches. So Zapdos, we were looking at Absol, which is in this deck. We were looking at Absol as a Zapdos counter because it makes your opponent's basic Pokemon have +1 retreat cost, which means a Jirachi with an escape board does not have free retreat anymore. But since they're playing 3 rope and 3 switch and also 4 Guzma, if you want to count those, they have 10 other switch options outside of the 3 escape board. And 4 of those are Guzma, so they can easily just Guzma up the Absol, kill it with Thunderous Assault plus Electropower, and get on with the game. But since they have so many switching options outside of the escape board, I don't think Absol is a good enough counter for this deck. It's definitely a soft counter, but it's not going to just stop them dead in their tracks. The engine that the deck runs off of is pretty much the 4 Jirachi and then supporter draw. They don't have item draw in the deck. They have search, so they have the 4 Nest Ball, the 1 Ultra Ball. But then the rest of their items are pretty much damage modification and switching cards. Their draw is the Jirachi and the Oranguru, which are both basic Pokemon abilities, and then the supporter cards. So they have a heavy item count. Even though they don't play draw item-based draw, they still have 23 items. Between, like the 4 Electropower, the 4 Nest Ball, the 9 switch items. There's a lot in there. So the deck can comfortably put out 110 to 130 damage a turn. It can reach for higher numbers with bursting, so putting multiple Electropowers down in a turn and a Kukui, but then you don't have those Electropowers later, so your consistent damage is lowered if you go higher. So let's say you use 3 Electropowers really early, you're going to be swinging for 80 or maybe 100 with Kukui most turns, and then you have 1 Electropower left over. So they can either, swing out 110, 130 turn after turn, or they can go higher and reach for a larger knockout, but then have less damage output later on. So, like I mentioned, it has a soft counter to the mirror with the Absol, but in 60 card mirrors, they're also going to have the switches in the escape rope, so it's not amazing. Tapu Koko GX keeps Pikarom in check. It could also be good against things like Gardevoir or a Zoroark with 4 energy on the board. It averages low HP, so 8 of the Pokemon are 4 Jirachi, 4 Zapdos, and that's 70 HP and 110 HP. So that's notable to mention that because Spread can put a lot of damage on the board with just flying flips, move it around, take multiple knockouts. 2 Choice Band, 2 Shrine. So it has these 4 slots for damage buffs versus GX decks, and only 4 useless cards versus other single prize attacking decks. So I really liked that for the deck. This is actually less of a weakness, and just something I wanted to point out, that it's nice they only have 4 poor slots versus mirrors and other single prize attacking decks, rather than having like 4 Shrine and 3 Choice Band, which would be 7 dead cards essentially in a single prize attacking match. So they have 4 of these cards that help them versus GX, which can be a con if you look at it that way. They only have 4 cards to help them reach higher numbers versus GX decks, my bad. But on the flip side, they also only have 4 dead cards versus single prize attackers, so it's good and bad there. So we have a couple of slides here for how to capitalize on the weaknesses we see in the deck. Alolan Muk is a huge one. Power of Alchemy, each basic Pokemon in play in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile has no abilities. If you watch the finals match, Stefan versus Isaiah, Stefan's playing Zoroark with Lucario in it. He does have an Alolan Muk, but he is not playing an Alolan Grimer. His only option to evolve into Alolan Muk is the Ditto, and you'll see he benches Ditto, and then immediately Isaiah rightfully Guzmas it and kills it with Zapdos, and then Stefan has no way to get out Alolan Muk for the game. In testing with my Zoroark deck, I played an Alolan Grimer and a Ditto, so if both of them are not prized, I try to get both a Ditto and an Alolan Grimer on the bench turn 1, and they can pick. They can Guzma one and let me evolve into the other, or they can Guzma something else like a Zoro or a Rockruff, but having the Ditto and the Alolan Grimer on board at the same time guarantees to your opponent, hey, if I have Pokemon Search and I make this my priority, I'm getting the Alolan Muk next turn. And Alolan Muk takes a Guzma, a Thunderous Assault for 80, plus Electropower, to hit the Oko on the Alolan Muk. And that's wasting, not necessarily wasting, but it's making your opponent use Guzma and 2 Electropowers. And especially if they're knocking out the Alolan Muk with an Alolan Grimer under it, you can just Rescue Stretcher the Alolan Grimer and put that threat back on the board. Absol, like I said, it's kind of a soft counter to this deck. It's more of a nuisance, really, because it doesn't stop them, since they have the switches and the escape ropes, but it is very good against Jirachi Escape Board in general, which is going to be all over the format. Mount Lanakila, the retreat cost of each basic Pokemon in play is 1 colorless more. I think this is interesting. So normally we've seen this in stall decks, so you can counter catcher something up and try to just deck your opponent out or make them waste turns after turn trying to get their Pokemon out of the active. This could also be a nice counter to the Jirachi Escape Board. The problem with Absol is you can't use its ability while Alolan Muk is down, and I think Alolan Muk is a much stronger counter to this deck, because instead of just stopping them from retreating, you're stopping them from using the Jirachi ability. But that also means they have a free rotation card with the Jirachi Escape Board into Zapdos to make it do maximum damage. If you were to play Alolan Muk and Mount Lanakila, you can shut off their Jirachi's abilities, and their Jirachi with the skateboard no longer has free retreat. So I think this is a really interesting idea that I'm going to try out further. So these are 3 control-ish cards that I think could have the upper hand on Zapdos in combination or maybe in the same deck and using them at different times. So Shuckle GX, its Protective Shell. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have 2 or fewer energy attached to them. So a Zapdos with 1 energy is not damaging Shuckle. A Zapdos with 2 energy is not damaging Shuckle. A Zapdos with 3 energy would damage Shuckle. So you could keep those energies down with things like Crushing Hammer or Skull Grunt to get them out of the hand, or even the new Lycanroc GX from Team Up that when you evolve you can discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, since they are playing 3 Escape Rope and 4 Guzma, they could just get around the Shuckle, but if you only had, let's say you only have a Shuckle out, or you have a bench full of Zoroark GXs, if you're playing Zoroark Control, it wouldn't be much benefit for them to Guzma up a Zoroark, hit it, if you're just going to Acerola and get right back into Shuckle in the active. Wondrous Labyrinth is also here because of its energy-esque disruption. The attacks of non-fairy Pokemon cost 1 colorless more, so effectively you're doing something like Shuckle. They need 1 more energy to attack, but Shuckle they need 2 more energy to attack. But Wondrous Labyrinth can definitely stop them for a bit, especially if they've run out of stadiums. The deck has 2 Shrine and 1 Thunder Mountain. Now, I'm not going to say everybody's going to use this exact 60, but it's a nice baseline to go off of on how to counter this Zapdos Jirachi archetype that's probably going to be blowing up everywhere because Isaiah Williams just won OCIC with it. So here we have some cards for Stall, Wall, Mill variants. It's not really Mill in Standard, but that's what some people call it. Zapdos cannot knock out something like a Magikarp Wailord GX. Even a Regigigas with an Ancient Crystal on it is going to be damn near impossible. So 300 HP, if you're doing things like Max Potion and Acerola, then Lusamine your Acerola is Acerola again, and just switch between beefy stall Pokemon like Magikarp Wailord, while maybe throwing some Crushing Hammers, Team Skull Grunts, things like that into the mix. Your opponent's eventually going to deck themselves out or run out of resources. So I don't know how great Stall is against the meta. I've never been a Stall player. If anything, I like Control variants more than Stall. But I definitely think this has a great Zapdos matchup at the very least. So I've prepared a few decks here. First we're going to look at Zoroark Control. I threw together this list a couple weeks ago and I just fixed it up after looking at the OCIC results. So strictly speaking about the Zapdos matchup, this should be fine versus Zapdos and a lot of other things that Zoroark Control was already good against. If you're able to run them out of stadiums by either replacing them with Mount Lanakeelas, which they will want to bump, or using Persian's pay attack, the colorless does 20 damage. Look at your opponent's hand, and you discard cards from there until they're down to 4 to get rid of stadiums and energy. You can eventually get the Black Market Prism card out, a Sableye with a Dark Energy or Rainbow Energy, and stop them from using supporters with limitation, which will make them have to knock out the Sableye, and they won't take a prize for doing so as long as Black Market Prism's out. That's kind of the idea of the deck. And then you're just going to stall them out until they're out of resources or they deck out. It's kind of like what I talked about doing with a stall variant, but this is more control because of the Sableye. You're actually attacking, and you have a lot of answers for a lot of different decks in a Zoroark Control deck like this. Next, and probably my favorite and probably the safest way to counter, is just Zoroark with an Alolan Grimer and Alolan Muk in it. Like I said, Stefan was not playing an Alolan Grimer, and I think that was definitely his downfall versus Zapdos. Amongst other things, bad draws, the penalty he received in Game 1. So here, I kept a Lucario. I put a 1-1 Lucario GX. Stefan was playing 2-2. I went down to 1-1. That's for Pika-Rom, of course, but Lycanroc is also good against Pika-Rom. And I have a counter gain in there, which Stefan wasn't using, so that you can essentially get a Lycanroc with 1 energy attacking out of nowhere with the help of the counter gain. We're trying out 1 Mount Lanakeela in here as well as the Viridian Forest and the Wondrous Labyrinth. The Wondrous Labyrinth is a good Lost March counter, but it's also good against Zapdos for reasons that I've explained. And the Mount Lanakeela with Alolan Muk is actually really cool. So, and Zoroark is already a great deck. So if you can just make it have a really convincing matchup versus Zapdos with the help of the Alolan Muks and the Acerolas, Palpad to get back more Acerolas, I think this is a great choice going into Collinsville. And last but not least, we have the Spread Malamar list that I posted in a recent YouTube video on the Buster Busted series. So I actually made that video, and then the next day took this deck to a League Challenge, went 4-0. Not the biggest achievement of my life, but it showed that the deck can run consistently and do what it's supposed to do, which is what I really wanted to see out of it. So against Zapdos, you can just focus on the flying flips, even in Ultimate Arrow out of Shining Arceus if you can get there, and then try to clean up with the Sky Scorching Light from Ultra Necrozma, since they have the 110 HP Zapdos and the 70 HP Jirachis, the 100 HP Absol, and the 120 HP Oranguru. You can just spread damage around, and even if they're taking knockouts after knockouts on you, you can just come back in the game with the Ultimate Arrow or the Sky Scorching Light to just clean up. You also have Magical Swap as a win condition, but I think Sky Scorching Light really shines against any deck using Jirachi, since their HP starts out so low. Note that I changed one card out of this deck since my YouTube video. I just dropped the Erica's Hospitality for a 4th Nest Ball, and I really like that change. That's what I played at the League Challenge that I went 4-0 at. So I hope this helps you try to decide if you want to play Zapdos or beat Zapdos. I think it's a really consistent deck. It has efficient damage output that can be consistent if you don't have to burst down a larger Pokemon. It has Tapu Koko GX that keeps in check the larger Pokemon like Pika-Ram and Gardevoir, and even Zoroarks with energy on different Zoroarks. It has the escape ropes and switches to get around Absol. The only thing it doesn't effectively get around is Alolan Muk with an Alolan Grimer to evolve from. And I think that's going to be really strong going into Collinsville. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, I want to shout out FlipsideGaming.com. Make sure you check them out and use code CELIO, all caps, for 10% off of your next order, $10 or more. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video, and over to the right are some other videos you might enjoy. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.